Hi guys, just going to talk you through my basic standard safe chop against loop using both long pips and anti-spin. Starting here with the long pips, you can see the distance from the table is again back far enough so that I can take the ball most times between my waist and my knee. With the long pips and the anti-spin, because the control is a little bit easier, you can find yourself taking the ball a little bit higher and a little bit closer to the table, being a little bit more aggressive because it is easier to control. Whereas with the inverted rubber, sometimes it's easier to take a little half step back to give yourself a little bit more time to take the ball, control the ball, let the spin die down. Again, just looking at the basic technique here, moving on to that, putting weight onto the right foot and then pushing through the stroke to bring myself back up to a normal level. Again, the basic stroke, in essence, not that much different from the inverted stroke. I don't want it to look all that different. The fundamentals are still the same, really just to get the right leg out, point the toe towards the side, put weight onto the right leg, bring the bat up towards the shoulder, and again you can see my little looping backswing at the top, but coming down fairly straight line, almost not quite a 45-degree angle, perhaps a 60-degree angle even. Really here with the long pips, not trying to brush the ball too heavily. This is my standard safe chop that I can control. The idea being to be able to control any heavy topspin ball, maximum safety and a good amount of backspin provided by the long pips. So it's not a risky stroke for me, it's really just the fundamental safe stroke that I can resort to at any time to control a good heavy topspin. A little bit of shoulder turn there, you can really see how my shoulders square onto the camera without a lot of head turn though. You notice the head is really tracking the ball onto the bat while the free arm is just doing its job. Now let's just go to slow-mo, which will give us a bit of a better look. You can see the little loop at the top of the backswing, bat goes up past the shoulder, comes down, very much a straight line, finishing in front of the right knee, and sometimes above, sometimes below, but definitely in front of that right knee. Contact made roughly on the knee in terms of from the side-on point of view. That's just where I like to hit the ball. It can be a little bit more forward. You can vary the timing forward or backward if you like. You can get a good view here of the shoulder turn through the ball, and the free arm really just being used to help myself balance, and a little shuffle of the feet just to bring me back into a square ready position for the next stroke. So again, fundamentally just a simple, nothing too aggressive with the wrist. The swing speed doesn't need to be too fast. I'm not trying to take a chance here, I'm simply controlling the ball with the long pips, letting the long pips do the job to control the ball for me. Let's move now to the front view of the long pips, and again possible to see here really it's just a fundamentally simple stroke, allowing the long pips to do the heavy lifting for me rather than me trying to do anything radically fast with my swing speed or too much wrist snap. All of those things can be brought in for variation, but the fundamental stroke to practice and groove first is really just simple bat up, chop through the ball, not too much wrist, smooth feel, finishing in front of that right knee, not finishing down near the knee itself, but coming in front of the knee and then bringing the bat across and recovering back into a basic ready position. Watching the ball at all times, really watching onto the onto the bat itself. Again, legs could be a lot wider really. I would prefer to be another good step wider, but I have a tendency to play a little bit upright, and as I get tired it does tend to creep back. So again, that's a flaw in my own technique, not something to be copied but something to be pointed out and avoided by yourself if you can. Getting wider will be better. Possible from this angle also just to see the height of the ball where I'm making contact. Quite high, not quite waist high, though occasionally at around that waist height, but just a little bit below waist height in general, which is possible with the long pips because of the ease of the control. Whereas with the the inverted rubber, to provide this form of control, I would tend to be just another half step back to allow a little bit more spin to come off the ball. And again, just simple stroke. And now let's just go to a slow-mo view. Bat up, coming through the ball, and really giving it that face of the bat all the way through the hitting zone. So I'm not trying, as my forward swing begins, I don't want to mess with my bat angle too much. Especially with long pips, there's no real benefit from it. I get my bat angle set and do my backswing. At the top of the backswing I set my angle and just swing forward and let then the rubber do most of the work in this safe chop. As I got more aggressive I would add more wrist, possibly come under the ball a little bit more, or swing through the ball a little bit more if I wanted to float the ball. But for this fundamental safe chop, there's really not a lot to go wrong. I'm not complicating the stroke, and that makes it a very safe stroke for me. Let's compare now to the anti-spin version of this safety chop. First thing you'll notice is probably that I'm a little bit further back for the anti-spin than for the long pips. You'll see my placement from the table is just another half step further back. Reason for that is really the anti-spin that I'm using, the Osaka anti-power, is just a little bit more jumpy than the long pips, and tends to pop a little bit more, and being that little bit further back just allows me to take the ball a little bit lower, counteract that easily while I'm getting the feel for the rubber itself in the defence. And again with this safety chop, with the anti-spin, the throw is a little bit higher, it does pop a little higher, it doesn't add a lot of significant spin, so there's not a lot of benefit with this anti-spin of trying to snap the wrist a lot, and even with the long pips where you can bend the pips, doesn't work really well with this anti-spin. There's not a lot of point to it. So the safety version of here is really what I'd be using for most of my anti-spin chopping, and occasionally bringing in a faster swing or a slower swing to try and confuse my opponent and hopefully make him think I'm perhaps using the inverted side, or just get him a little bit hesitant due to the different swing speed or an obvious wrist snap, something like that, just to give him a look at something a little bit different. But bang for the buck, you don't get the same results from trying to brush under the ball and snap your wrist with anti-spin as you do with the long pips, where you can bend those pips and really get some value for money. For the risk that you're taking, you really can get the effect. The anti-spin when chopping tends to be just a very safe, but basically a reflection of the spin that's already on the ball. It's harder for you to manipulate that spin. You can see though that from the basic technique it really is fundamentally similar to the long pips. There's not a lot of differences, and the slow motion version here will just highlight that. Again, my basic setup of my body really doesn't change. I don't want to change that very much. Looping up the top. The swing, you'll notice is a little bit probably more vertical, from straight up to straight down compared to the long pips, and that's simply because the anti-spin does tend to be a little bit more throwing high, putting the ball up, so I need to swing a little bit more vertically just to counteract that. It's just a function of the anti-spin itself. But the basic fundamentals of bringing the bat up, using the shoulder, the arm to stroke through the ball, not too much wrist because it's not required, is really not that much different from long pip technique. Let's look now at the front view version, and again, possibly without the sound, it would be very hard to say whether I'm using the long pips or the anti, apart from perhaps the fact that you'll notice the anti, I'm putting the ball perhaps a little bit higher than I would with the long pips, simply because my stroke is grooved very much for long pips, and I'm having to consciously adjust my bat angle for the anti-spin itself, which tends to make me put the ball a little bit higher. As the hitting progresses, you'll see the ball should hopefully come down as I start to adapt a little bit more. And again, that's one of the problems of constantly changing rubbers, is that you no longer can allow your unconscious to do the job. You have to be consciously thinking of adjusting the bat angle, which is why I don't like to mess with my rubbers very much in terms of my chopping rubbers. I prefer to stick to certain rubbers and just improve my technique and practice more. Again, from this front view, you can see really how the weight goes onto the right foot. The legs could be wider and could allow me to bend a little bit more. Contact point definitely outside the body, outside and in front of that right leg. Much easier to see from this front view that the contact is certainly at least a forearm width, and probably a forearm width and a good 6 or 7 inches gap between my elbow and my body. And if you look at it in slow motion at the time of contact, you'll notice that I tend to keep that bend in my elbow through most of the stroke until getting towards the follow through. Again, it's just one less variable to worry about, whereas if I was straightening my elbow a lot and snapping the forearm through the stroke, that would give me more variation, but not really it would hurt the consistency a little bit. And for this basic safe chop where I'm looking to put the ball back consistently and use the anti-spin itself to provide the effects, not really a high percentage option to do that kind of effect. But again, you can see that really I prefer to take the ball between that waist and the knee. On the occasions where I take it a little bit higher than the waist, you can really see I've been surprised by the robot and not taking it in optimum position. Conversely, when taking it low, as you'll see on the odd occasion where the robot really does throw the ball low, what tends to happen if you take it below your knee, unless you're very good at actually getting wide and low and putting some weight onto that right leg, what tends to happen is your body will tend to tilt and you'll tend to scoop the ball up instead of really chop the ball, and that will throw the ball high and affect your control. And I must admit, have a bit of a nasty habit of, on low balls, tending to not bend my knees enough and having to scoop the ball up instead of really being able to put a proper chop in, and something to all choppers should be aware of. Let's move now to the backhand with the long pips. This really, more than anything else, I guess you would call my bread and butter stroke. Using the backhand with the long pips just to set a good, reasonably medium heavy topspin with a lot of safety, and something that I've done sort of so often I can almost sort of perform that sort of stroke in my sleep. Footwork, generally in the backhand stance. Occasionally I'll play a shorter ball by bringing the left foot forward. You can get away with that a little bit more. The long pips tend to be a little bit more forgiving than some inverted rubbers, so you can take the odd shortcut and still get away with it. Again, the left arm is really just acting as a balance mechanism. The contact here, you'll notice, is compared to chopping on the forehand side, the contact point is a little bit further in front of the body, whereas my contact point on the forehand was more or less in line with the body, just the front of that hip. You can actually see that my contact is actually tends to be in front. That's a little bit of a function of the fact that I tend to stand fairly square on that backhand side. I don't tend to go to a full side stance, the old traditional 45-degree side stance. Not really necessary with the long pips. Possibly necessary sometimes with the inverted, but you'll see a lot of the Chinese and Japanese choppers these days actually chopping from a fairly square stance, certainly much more square than the old traditional 45-degree stance, and really looking here to get the bat up. Again, the swing is not quite possibly as underneath as with the inverted rubber. It's certainly not needing to be. The long pips allow you to control the ball much better, and you don't get quite the benefit of really trying to come under the ball and skim the ball. You will get some effect with the bending of the long pips, of course, and that's an essential variation. But for this, which is just my basic standard safe chop that I want to be able to do over and over again, I'm not looking to do anything too radical with the bending of the pips. I'm just letting the ball impact into the bat, bend the pips that way without me trying to add too much to it, and send the ball back on its way. Again, good example here with the slower motion of just how the contact for me here is definitely in front of the body, up to the side, which you'll see in a second, but definitely from a sideways point of view, the contact is in front rather than the side, and that works better simply because it is on the backhand side of my body and it's more comfortable. Continuing with the long pips here, and now from the front view, a good opportunity now to see that in comparison again to the backhand push close to the table, I tend to be in a little bit more of a backhand stance. The contact point, if you're noticing in terms of where it's related to the square, the front on of my body, contact point is no longer between my belly button and my left hip. Contact is now tending to be outside my left hip, and preferably not too far away from my left knee. That's simply where I like to contact. Idea being is if you're contacting the ball too far outside that left knee on this backhand, you may actually find yourself being a little bit too far leant over. Your balance may be affected and your recovery will then be affected. Whereas if you can maintain contact between sort of where the top of your left hip is and where your left knee sort of ends up once you put weight onto it, what you'll find is your center of gravity will still be inside your legs and your feet, and pushing back and recovering will be a lot faster than if you're actually sort of bending over that left knee and having your center of gravity and your weight being further than your leg, and that will slow down your recovery. So just a little technical thing to watch. Again, taking the ball height roughly middle of the leg to waist height. Again, on the backhand, it's a luxury that you can enjoy of taking the ball a little bit higher with long pips than with the inverted rubber. And just about to move to the slow motion version here to allow us just to get a better view really of the preparation and the smooth swing through the ball. Nothing too much with the wrist. I guess the best way to describe what I'm trying to do with my wrist here is I'm not consciously doing anything with my wrist. So I'm not trying to restrict my wrist in any way, but I'm not trying to add anything to the ball with my wrist either. So whatever my wrist naturally does, I just allow it to do. That then gets the wrist out of my thinking and allows me to play a fairly natural stroke, which when in these cases you're looking to play a safe shot and allow the long pips to do the work, having less things to go wrong, not trying to swing radically faster or slower, just letting the long pips do the job, taking things like arm speed and wrist snap out of the equation, make things simpler and less likely to go wrong. Returning now to the side view, but with the anti-spin. Probably the first thing you'll notice if you compare the anti-spin, my chopping with the anti-spin versus going back and looking at the side view with the long pips, you'll notice how the ball does tend to pop higher straight away from this anti-spin itself. Again, another chance really just to brush up on the technique fundamentals here. The contact is, because I'm a right-hander and on my backhand here, if I was trying to contact the ball very much on the side of my body, say we're making the contact near where my left knee is, which is roughly where I was taking the ball on the forehand, I was taking it where the right knee was. Trying to do that on the backhand would actually force me to turn even further, and would be for myself a little bit, I would find that a little bit uncomfortable in how far I'd have to actually bring the shoulder back. And you'll notice what's really happening here is the swing, the contact point is dictated to a certain extent by where my right shoulder ends up at the time of swinging down. On the backhand, the contact point is a few inches in front of that right shoulder, because that's where it's comfortable to swing. And on the forehand, again, the contact point is a few inches in front of the right shoulder. It just so happens that on the backhand the right shoulder leads, and on the forehand the right shoulder is back, and that tends to explain most of the difference in the contact point itself. It's simply where you will find you will be comfortably swinging. It's not that I'm consciously trying to take the ball earlier on the backhand, it's just where it's comfortable to do so. And again here, the stance could be a little bit more forward, the legs could definitely be a little bit wider. That would be, in terms of technique, much nicer. The backswing's not too bad, it's up towards the shoulder. I wouldn't mind having it up towards the ear. That would certainly be better than having it sort of like only halfway up to the shoulder, as I occasionally do with my long pips. And here's a better example of a backswing there, up to the shoulder. Again, around shoulder height, which is not too bad. And occasionally, as that instance there and here, sometimes a little bit of a shorter backswing. Again, if you're doing it on purpose for variation's sake, not a bad idea. But in terms of this basic fundamental chop, it would be nicer to have it up consistently, consistently high preparation. In terms of things that I'm doing right, looking at the ball quite well onto the bat, my focus is good. My preparation to a basic ready position between points, I'm coming back, possibly not a low one, but definitely back to a ready position again. I'm not getting stuck anywhere. So there are certainly still some things that are fine with the stroke, even though I may be a little bit tired. And let's finish now with the front view of the anti-spin. You can definitely see the ball popping up a little bit higher here until I start to adjust my swing angle and get it under control, and starting to bring the ball down now as I adjust my bat angle. Really not adjusting my swing speed, not adjusting my wrist snap, just changing the bat angle a little bit to swing a little bit more vertically and hold my bat a little bit more vertically to just bring that ball down again. The unfortunate thing is then, of course, that I have to consciously do that, whereas with my long pips it's obviously more of a natural reaction. So every time I don't consciously quite get it right, you'll see the ball pop up a little, followed by myself then correcting automatically to bring the ball down again. Having said that, you can see the free arm here is really just acting as a balance point to allow me to maintain balance. The weight is still going onto the left knee. Contact point is in front of the body, out to the side, where it's comfortable for me to swing from the shoulder. The follow through the ball is forward once contact has been made, and probably 6 inches to a foot after that contact with the ball, the natural follow through is allowed to occur with my arm going through to the side rather than trying to extend all the way in front. So it's more a case of, by setting up correctly with the bat up high towards your shoulder, swinging down and forward, you can swing through your hitting zone without much change in your bat angle. Once the ball's been contacted and your natural swing starts to bring the bat across your body, simply allow it to happen, because the ball has been hit by then, and that naturally swinging over to the right that you can see, or in this case to the camera's left, brings the bat back into my ready position for me for the next stroke anyway. So it's not something to fight, it's just something to allow to occur. Again, you can see here I'm watching the ball onto the bat quite well. Because the knees and the stance aren't quite as low as I would like and as wide as I would like, you'll see me, especially from this point of view, you can actually see kind of myself dipping forward from the torso a little bit more during the stroke. Now, a little bit of natural lean is always good, but what's happening here is you can actually kind of see me actually dipping forward even further to compensate for the fact that I'm actually not low enough for the ball. And there is a very good example of the ball is low, but instead of adjusting with my knees, I'm adjusting by tilting more forward with my from the waist. That affects my balance and it affects my swing, because my bat angle is thrown off because my torso is all tilted differently, and that can cause bad side effects in terms of your consistency. Whereas if I had adjusted with my knees, got lower to the ball, I could have maintained my usual position of my torso and my normal swing would work. And it's again a very good example of how a simple thing in one area, such as the inability to get down with my feet, causes me to adjust somewhere else, bending over with my torso, then affects my swing angle and can affect my consistency.